Back in the late 80s, I worked as a property manager in London, and for one reason or another, the flats I was looking after weren't exactly legal. It was pretty much my job to collect the rent, organize repairs, and act as a buffer between the real owner and the authorities, in case they ever caught wind of what we were doing. It was all hush-hush, cash under the table stuff. We didn't care much about who our tenants were if you could hand over about 60 quid a month, which was a good bit back then. We'd give you a room in a shared house with a communal kitchen and bathroom. These days, most landlords ask foreigners for proof of their right to stay in the country. And I think if you're found housing illegal immigrants, you can get in real trouble. But back then, we didn't give a damn where you came from or who you were. All we cared about was the money. The same thing applied when I first met a guy named Ethan. He mentioned something about being from Ohio, but I never saw any papers to prove it. His name could have been anything, and he could have been from anywhere. I met him outside this derelict house in Finsbury, one of the properties I managed emphases on derelict. The room he wanted was an absolute dumping wallpaper, damp patches everywhere, and a smell that was half mold, half despair. It was the kind of dump that make even a rat turn its nose up. Ethan didn't seem desperate enough to rent that place, but after a quick look around, he told me he'd take it. Honestly, I was surprised but not enough to argue. I just took his money, handed over the keys, and that was that. Next month, I went by to collect the rent, but Ethan wasn't there. Turns out he'd cleaned the place up, gotten rid of the mold, fixed some of the peeling wallpaper, and had even left a note on his bed that said busy at work, money, and pillowcase. We'd dealt with some pretty sketchy characters before, and I'd had someone try to pull a scam like that on me. They'd say something like, "Must have been someone else who got in before I did," and claim that since it wasn't their fault, they shouldn't have to pay twice. That caused a lot of trouble for that particular tenant. I remember thinking, God, not another one of these, but when I checked the pillowcase, there was the rent money every month, just like clockwork. It suited me because I never had to chase him down. Ethan was reliable as hell. Then came the month things went sideways, and you're about to see what I mean. It was a bleak Tuesday lunchtime, gray skies, dull as hell outside. I drove over to the house in Finsbury to get the rent, and the place was dead quiet, no one on the street, just the hum of traffic and the occasional cough from the guy downstairs. I knocked on Ethan's door out of habit. No answer. Same as always. I just pushed it open. His room was the same as it always was, bare walls, a single bed, a battered old chair, and a wardrobe that was basically falling apart. I went to check the pillowcase expecting to find the cash, but there was nothing. Patted it, shook it, nothing. That wasn't like Ethan at all. He'd only been renting for about 6 months, but he paid on time, always took care of everything. I then opened the wardrobe expecting to see his clothes, but it was completely empty. The place was gutted. That always stung a little, finding a reliable tenant decide to move on. I was about to leave when I noticed something bulging under the battered leather suitcase, worn around the edges. Normally, I wouldn't check someone's stuff, but something felt off. Ethan hadn't left any rent behind or anything, so that suitcase, what was it doing there? I hesitated for a second, then thought, screw it. I'll just have a quick look, maybe there's a note or something. I shut the door, knelt by the bed, and pulled out the battered suitcase. Flicked the latch, lifted the lid, and my heart stopped. Ethan was inside, his body all twisted and broken, as if someone had forced him into that cramped space. His arms looked snapped, bent at odd angles, his legs tucked backwards under him, his face gray, with his eyes wide open, staring blankly. It was horrifying, like he'd been folded up and thrown away. I scrambled to my feet, covering my mouth to block out the stench, which was overwhelming. I backed out, hands trembling, and burst through the door, stumbling down the stairs 2 at a time. Outside, I instinctively fumbled for my pack of cigarettes, lit one, and took a long drag, but it did nothing to steady me. I paced outside the house, trying to figure out what in hell I was supposed to do. I knew the owner of the property, to call him Mr. Carter, was involved in some pretty shady dealings in London's underworld. I didn't want to call the police and risk inviting trouble into one of his properties, but this was no broken window or unpaid rent. This was a dead body. I found a few coins in my pocket, walked to the nearby phone booth and dialed him. His wife answered first, handed the phone over to him, and I told him there was a body in the suitcase. I didn't come right out with it back then. We had a way of knowing how to talk around stuff, but he understood. I could tell he was about to lose it, but instead, he stayed surprisingly calm. He asked if I was sure the tenant had left. When I said yes, he told me not to involve anyone else, especially not the police, and asked where Ethan was right then. When I told him, he told me to help Ethan move out. I told him in so many words I wasn't getting involved in a murder. We should just call the authorities, let them know as little as possible about what we'd been doing, and hope they overlooked us. The owner, though, wasn't having it. He warned me that if I contacted the police, I'd be out of a job and I'd be in serious trouble. Then he hung up. From that moment, I knew that the owner of that house was involved in way more than some dodgy flats. His words made it clear whatever else he was mixed up in, it was illegal as hell. My heart hammered in my chest as I hung up. I'd been working for somebody who was casually telling me to just dump a body like it was nothing. It wasn't just bad luck or a crooked landlord, it was dark. And whoever killed Ethan was a hell of a lot scarier than me. Someone capable of folding a guy like Ethan, breaking his arms and legs, twisting him into that tiny spacesuit, have to be pretty damn vicious. Honestly, I was relieved I never had to meet whoever that was. Later, I needed a break. I went to a pub called the Red Line nearby. It was only about 12:30, but I ordered a pint of lager, took a few sips just to steady myself. The bartender gave me a look but didn't say anything, just left me alone. I stared into my glass, feeling the whole thing switch from normal to pure nightmare in the blink of an eye. Ethan was a good tenant, quiet, paid on time, seemed like a decent guy. So who could have done that to him? And why? After about 15 or 20 minutes, I realized I couldn't keep this inside. I fished around in my pocket, found some more change, and dialed the police. About 20 minutes later, 2 cops in a patrol car showed up, flashing their lights. I waved as they drove past, then led them up to the flat and to Ethan's body. I only told them what I thought they needed to know. They said I did the right thing. Still, I was terrified. I knew as soon as my boss found out I'd gone to the police, I'd be in serious trouble. That night, I crashed at my old buddy Dave's place in Camden, because going home was too risky. I just lay on his sofa, wide awake, thinking my life was about to change forever. The next day, I heard that my bosser, well, the former boss by Think, knew about Ethan's body being at the morgue. The cops had started questioning the tenants and got a search warrant. That meant he'd probably sent someone looking for me. I asked Dave if I could stay low for a few days, until it was safe to go back home and grab my stuff. He said sure, but I didn't tell him everything. If I had, he probably wouldn't have let me stay. I stayed put, knowing something was off but not saying a word. I was scared to go back to my own place, so I let it be. A week later, I snuck into my flat in the dead of night. Notice to leave had long expired. When I opened the door, I was hit with chaos. My door had been forced open. It looked like a bomb had gone off inside. My phone was smashed, my sofa ripped apart, all my records broken, and the bedroom reeked of something rotten. I could smell it from outside, like some kind of chemical fire. I didn't take anything. There was nothing left for me anyway, except to call my mom and send her away a coach to Manchester, the safest place I could think of. Rumors had already spread that men had been asking around about me, so she needed to be far away. Getting her to pack her bags was a battle. She didn't even know what I did for a living. But I told her the people looking for me were dangerous, and if they found her, they might hurt her. The next day, we checked into a B&B in Manchester. I had a little cash, enough to find us a place to stay. For a while, I decided to turn my life around and be honest, no more dodging trouble or working for shady folks. We never got caught, but at night the nightmares came. I dreamed someone slipping me into a suitcase and shoving me beneath a bed, waking up frightened, thinking someone was at the door. It haunted me. I still wonder if the police ever caught anyone for Ethan's murder. I doubt it. But I don't think my former boss had anything to do with it either. Maybe he just wanted the suitcase gone. If whoever put Ethan in that suitcase had wanted him dead, they'd have done a better job. They'd have been more cold-blooded. No, I think someone else put him there. Someone pretty dangerous. Someone who could overpower him easily, twist him up like that. That's a person I'm glad I never met. Years later, I was running a few rundown buildings here in New York City, nothing fancy, just old walk-ups in the East Village. I was a working-class guypipes, rent collection trying to keep the place afloat. Most tenants were decent, but every now and then you get the real psycho. Of all of them, Gerald was the worst. He moved in during the summer of '96, a skinny guy, late 20s, with a scruffy beard and eyes that never blinked. He always wore this ratty trench coat, even in the heat. At first, I thought he was okay, but that turned out to be right. He paid rent on time, slipped the payments under my door early in the morning, and kept mostly to himself. The only weird thing was that sometimes he'd come in the middle of the night, lugging huge cases of glass bottles, jingling up the stairs. That was only a small part of his oddness until the sewer started backing up. The basement was filled with stinking sludge. People started losing their minds. I couldn't afford a plumber. I had to fix it myself. I grabbed my heavy-duty drain snake, the kind you crank by hand, and some gloves. At the building, I found the clean-out plug, set a bucket, and took off the trap. Started feeding the snake into the pipe, probing for the blockage. I felt something squishy but solid. Probably hair grease, who knows. I kept messing with it, pushing, twisting, yanking, and suddenly, it all dislodged. I got ready for the flood of sewer water, but what came out was way worse. It wasn't just a hairball or a clog. Floating in the water was something I can only describe as a giant, slimy, moldy lump, no shell, just this gray-green flesh. I poked at it with the snake and it didn't move. It looked almost like a fungus, some weird slime mold. I didn't go near it, didn't want any part of that, just poured the bucket into the sewer outside, flushed the pipes, and went home to shower. But I kept wondering how that thing got there. I asked around later, knocked on tenants' doors, and most claimed they hadn't flushed anything strange. Only Gerald was missing, and I suspected him. When I finally got in his apartment, I saw nothing but a bizarre mess, books with Latin labels, odd paintings, a collection of glass jars lined up on shelves in his utility closet, all filled with murky water and floating organic chunks. It looked just like what had come out of that pipe. Then I turned around, and there he was, Gerald, in the doorway, trench coat over his arm, with a strange smile. He asked what I was doing. I told him about the drain blockage, then asked what was in those jars. He looked at me, smiled, and said, "They're my friends," in a voice so chilling I still remember it. I told him to stop messing around, asked again what he'd blocked the drain with. He just kept smiling that creepy smile, knowing I was onto him. Then he said, "You shouldn't be here." That's when I realized I had no business inside unless it was an emergency. And it wasn't. Since I suspected he was responsible for all that, I told him off and got out of there fast. Back in my truck, I called my cousin Nikias, a cop, and told him what I saw. He said unless Gerald was cooking meth or skinning animals, there wasn't much the police could do. But to stay safe, I had to serve him eviction paper, so I did. I filed a notice citing lease violations, unsafe conditions, whatever I could. And the next morning I slid it under his door. Gerald didn't fight it. He didn't say a word. His neighbors, though, gave me the scoop. An old woman heard strange noises, and Jamal from across the hall said he saw Gerald carrying a jar down the fire escape at night, clutching it like a treasure. I told them everything would be fine, that Gerald was leaving soon. Still, that placid night before his eviction was up, I got a call from the old lady. She said the hallway reeked, and she'd heard him screaming and crying overnight. I drove over in a hurry. The apartment stank so bad I couldn't believe it, but it was obvious. Gerald was gone. No note, no sign of him, just one smashed jar on the floor, surrounded by a puddle of something that reeked like death. I gagged, covering my mouth, and turned right back around. I called a hazmat crew. The smell was so bad it had to be some kind of biohazard. They showed up, cleaned up the mess. They didn't ask questions, cost me over $1,000. When they finished, all that was left was the empty apartment and that terrible odor. No matter how much I scrubbed, it seeped into the walls, floorboards, all of it. Soon after, I heard from the old lady again. She said she saw something grotesque in her bathtub, pale and wriggling, then gone when she turned the light on. Jamal told me his kid had been staring into that drain, claiming he saw something. I gave them each a month's rent to keep them quiet, but they moved out within weeks. By summer, the building was half empty and I was hemorrhaging money. I hired a priest from St. Sabina's to bless the building, thinking maybe that would help, but it didn't. The place stayed empty, and I couldn't even rent it out. The smell lingered, sharp and rotten, like it had soaked into the very walls. Then one night the old woman called again. She said the hallway reeked worse than ever, and that she'd heard Gerald screaming in his apartment. I rushed over, and yes, smell was unbearable. It was clear he'd gone, but what sealed the deal was that one jar of smashed one laying in the kitchen, soaked in liquid death that made my eyes burn. I gagged again, and I finally called in a biohazard crew, which cost me an arm and a leg. They cleaned, but that initial stench stayed. That smell, the acidity, the rotate seemed to seep into everything, and nobody ever wanted to rent that place again. Months later, the old lady said she saw something in her bathtub, pale, wriggling, then gone when she turned on the light. Jamal's kid kept staring at the drain, whispering he saw the same thing. I gave them rent regardless and told them everything was fine. They moved out anyway, but the building kept emptying out. I even brought in a priest to bless it, but it didn't help. The smell persisted, and I swear I still feel it sometimes, sharp, rotten and acidic, like whatever was in that house, or inside that building, wouldn't die. After a while, I gave up trying to rent it and I just sold the place. The new owners knew about the problem. They had to tear the whole thing down. All I could say about the cause of that nightmare, I didn't know. I wish I did. I wish I had thrown Gerald out the second I saw those jars in his closet, because whatever was inside that thing, if it had escaped or kept growing, there'd be no getting rid of it now. Thanks for listening, friends. Make sure to hit that notification bell so you don't miss my new stories every Monday and Thursday at 9 p.m. EST. We do live streams every Sunday and Wednesday night, and if you've got a story, send it in. I want to hear them. Maybe yours will be featured next. For early access and bonus content, check out my Patreon or hit that join button for channel perks. And don't forget to listen to the Let's Read podcast, where I compile all these stories. Links are in the description. Thanks again, and remember, sometimes truth is stranger than fiction, and the scariest stories are the ones you never see coming.